There is a big reason why I don't make equipment and technique a big point of discussion on my show. I know it's important, but such discussions can lead down a rabbit hole where the choice of lens or lighting equipment carries more weight than it actually does or should. There are countless photographers who use virtually the same equipment, but produce significantly different results. Some would attribute differences to matters of talent, but I've come to believe that it's more about intention, imagination, playfulness, and the willingness to take risks. Hernan Rodriguez is a celebrity portrait photographer who has crafted his own personal approach to making photographs. He possesses a masterly understanding of light and color, but there's more to his photography than that. He gets that each encounter is as unique as his subject, and his approach reflects that. There is nothing cookie-cutter about Hernan's approach, which makes both his work and the man so special. This is Ibarian X, and welcome back to The Candor Frame. How have you been making use of this time?
I think, the first few weeks were just the adjustment, just trying to find, well, they canceled everything. I had probably like 7 workshops nationally, 1 international. So I went back to just doing a lot of what I used to do in art school, just reading a lot of like my Renaissance book, a lot of the painters, a lot of the things that took me back to what made me see what I see. And I was beneficial. It was great. A lot of research, a lot of reading. Yeah, and I think, just that pause, not to be rushing, because, sometimes we stop educating ourselves as photographers. We're chasing the next job, we're doing the retouching, we're doing production, and then we're like, whoa,
Yeah. You can't just lounge around during times like these and just lament the fact of what the things you can't do.
Absolutely.
Because once you go back, you're going to go, God, all that time I had, and I just wasted it.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you did the same, right? You took advantage of your time.
Yeah. I'm trying to, and educating myself as much as possible.
Right.
Reading nonfiction, reading some fiction that I had longed intended to catch up on, and
right.
And also just relaxing.
Right. Yeah. Your work is good. Very clean.
Oh, thank you.
Very clean work. It was just great. I spent some time surfing through there in my downtime.
Well, it's fun. It's fun for me. It's always been a part of my life, and luckily I've always been able to shoot what I like to shoot.
Right.
So
it's great.
But you were just mentioning, going to art school and looking at your artwork, and one of the interesting things I learned from you is that you really started your creativity in terms of drawing, and your dad was an artist. I don't know if he was professional or an enthusiast, but tell me about those early years for you.
Yeah, so my dad grew up as a technical engineer, and then he worked as an illustrator for an aerospace company. Though he had the mathematics and just drawing a lot of linear art, he spent times on his side job was just doing Renaissance replicas, paintings. So I spent hours of just looking at, the work behind it, just from a clean canvas to putting layers and layers of color and undertones of shadows, So all these things that I think, and it's funny because as a photographer, when I teach or when I have to write an article, it's so intuitive because it's the fabric of what I've seen my entire life that I have to go back and recall, like, why did I do this? And I'll give you an example. For instance, if you're drawing, and I saw one of the tricks my dad taught me was like, let's say you're painting a robe, and some of these Renaissance painters, you're painting a robe and you want these rich shadows, you would go with a sepia tone, which is like a brown undertone as your base color. And then you start building blue on top and different shades of blue, and you add a white for highlights. So when I light, I see myself going to that. I use sepia filters on my lights as an undertone, and then I started adding opposite color. I rarely do I light white light, so everything has some type of undertone. So I think just that influence on seeing that with my father and seeing colors come to life and seeing the shape of the anatomy and seeing, because then I decided to, I think when I was 5 years old, I knew this is what I wanted to do my entire life. And I just started honing in on what came naturally to me, if I could put it that way.
That makes a lot of sense. In terms of how you learned color in that way, would you see your dad doing something and ask him, well, how do you do that? Or were you observing him and sort of experimenting on your own?
The first thing I saw, part of the education is studying. Part of the education is just looking, and we as photographers have to really build that muscle, just to sit back and observe, look at light, how it behaves, how it transitions, how the values change. I think when I first started looking or learning about color, I just saw the magic happen. For instance, if I saw this blue, like just blue paint on a canvas, and all of a sudden I saw these creases and these shadows just building up, and then these highlights, all this separation happening. I just saw it in front of my eyes. So I was fascinated. And then I would ask my father, like, hey, how do you do this? And he was really patient. He was really patient with me, and he taught me how to build it up, how to build it up, and how to, it's incremental. So you just don't put, just white light for a highlight, white paint for a highlight. You just start putting, a little bit of highlights, and then start building more highlights and start separating even more. So if you think about photography, it's not any different. If you want to highlight from somebody, you just, don't put, there's not a formula to say, oh, you're just one stop brighter on an accent light or highlight, because you have to look at the parameters. And if you have a side that's really dark and shadow, then you don't go one stop brighter. You go, half a stop less, because it's going to show that much more. So it's not any different than painting. It's almost to taste, just apply the layer and see what happens. And that's what I started seeing, and there's different principles in color. You have pigment that mix together. You got additive color and subtractive color, and in art, it's a mix of yellow, red, and blue. With these three colors, you create every single color in the spectrum. So when I started seeing him mixing, like, for instance, a yellow with a green, then you got a gray, you started building up and creating a gray color and all these different things by adding blue. So I think the more I was understanding what was happening in front of me, the more questions I could ask, and that's what happens to us sometimes as photographers. Our vision is so far beyond what we could implement or really execute, and that's part of the craft. It's looking at the vision, seeing what you want, and then, finding the ways to do it and approach that.
Yeah, because I really love the way that you use color and how you play off the skin tones, the clothing people are wearing, the background, and the way you're describing it. It makes a lot more sense what I was looking at when I was looking at your work.
Right.
And I was having a conversation with some people this past weekend about how a lot of photographers work from the equipment forward. So let me see if I can explain this, is that they'll think about how the equipment is designed to work.
Right.
And they'll use it in just that way. So whether it's a softbox or an octa or an umbrella, they've learned this is the way that you use it. And basically they work from there. And the way I'm hearing you is that you will use those same tools, but you're coming from a very different starting point. You're thinking about how you want the color to look, and you are using those tools to get to that. And you're not just being limited by how a manufacturer has advertised a particular product.
That's a great observation, because I actually give that in my lectures. I'm asked often, like, what's your go-to, what's your go-to modifier? And I can't say there's a specific thing that I just go to. A softbox, for instance. I rarely use softboxes, but when I do use softboxes, and this is to the point you're making, straight out of the box, it's sent with a certain fabric modifier, and the inner baffle is either white, which gives it a softer transition in the skin tones. If it were silver, it becomes more reflective, more specular, more more of a pop. For me, I do like somewhere in the middle, and I always look for those modifiers that allow me to create that. So even the actual diffusion material that's in front of that softbox, I don't like that just opaque white. So there's this diffusion that one of my Westcott makes. It's like onion skin. It's like super, super translucent. It's almost like if you're putting onion skin, on top, in front of a paper light, and it just cuts just that enough light that I'm looking for. Because if it were any more opaque, it becomes like this peachy, soft portrait, which sometimes is good. It depends what it's for. But I like a little more pop in that. So I either create or I use an inner silver baffle, and then I start modifying it with those approaches. Sometimes I might not even use a diffusion material. I'll get this material called opal made by Roscoe, and it's just like this sheet of tracing paper, and I start building layers of it. Let's say, because, in photography or in any art, the eye is drawn to the brightest part of an image. So if everything's kind of dark and low key and you're calculated on what they're wearing in the background and everything, I'm drawing the viewer by putting that light placement and the value and the contrast and the quality of that light to the face, which is what portraiture is. We begin with the face and then we go forward. But then if it's too bright, it takes away too much, it's distracting. If it's too soft so I'm always looking for that medium in there. And that's how I do it. I put tracing paper. Sometimes I'll use black tooling and I start creating halfway down the softbox, cutting that layer because light still passes through. There's still some type of gradation. And I try to do everything in camera. And like you're saying, there's nothing straight out of the box and say, here's a softbox. This is what the manufacturer created it. This is what I'm going to use it. Because then that's not any different than, it's just really a glamorized, candid shot, if you don't know how to use those modifiers properly, correct?
Yeah. Many people may be surprised when they look at your portfolio. They see a lot of celebrities, a lot of sports figures, and that you got your early start not as a photographer, but more of as a graphic designer. So you were hiring photographers at one point. So considering you already had a sensitivity to color and light, even before you started picking a camera up on your own, when you were doing the hiring, what were the things that you were looking for in a photographer when you were on the side of the desk that says, okay, I want to hire this person for creating the work?
You know what? I think two things were what draw, and I looked at tons of portfolio. Sometimes we created magazines for like Triathlete Magazine, Men's Fitness, Men's Journal. I think and I would see just these images over and over and over and over. For me, what attracted me to a photographer was like something that stopped me from flipping that page, if I could put it that way. So if I'm looking through images and if it's, something athletic, then, everybody, if you look at athletic shots, I just did a photo shoot this past week with Reggie Miller for a project. But if you're looking through and I was doing my research, I'm looking at people's work and, I like to see like, hey, what's out there? Nothing really stops me. The ones that do stop me are the ones that like, wow, what's happening here? It's either contrast, it's expression, it's value, it's an interesting angle, something creative, So those are the first things. Then I go to see the technical attributes. What could this person really, execute a photo shoot? Is everything exposed properly? What's the quality of the work? But I think if it doesn't get me to that point, and sometimes you might see something just like it's beautiful, everything beautifully lit and everything's just so proper. But then it's just, there's nothing there, there's no emotion, there's nothing. So I think it was a mix of both of that. It had to have that kind of that wow factor, and I judged competitions for like the WPPI and some of these big federations. And until it got me to that point of like, stop, pause, even if it was for like 2 seconds, then that's my starting point. Okay, let me look at the values and let me look at but that to me was one of the things. So when I became a photographer, I think that I applied it to my own work. I'm super critical in my own work, and sometimes I kind of keep on going with it. But yeah, I think that's kind of important for us as photographers.
I heard that one of the things that helped to launch your photographic career was a burglary.
Yes, I don't know where you found that, but that's absolutely right. It's so funny because back to the story. So we did some of the hiring. I hired some of the photographers, and I think it bounced back from that because I picked up a camera and I told the company like let's just do this. Let's just have a camera. Let's set it on automatic and let's see what we get. And we did it in a project. We did a catalog and we shot everything on automatic. Because we had the vision, we did storyboards, and me working with the art director and back and forth, like we shot it, and it was a fun experience. But during that point, I was working, as a graphic designer. I did stuff like for Corona, I did stuff for Guess Jeans, I did stuff for the Olympics. I had this body of work, and I just had moved from one location to the other. So all I set up at this new location was my computer, my hard drive, my scanners, and everything. And we had constructors, construction people coming in and out. Following morning was all gone. I was like, everything, like they wiped away my business overnight. And to me it was like a pivotal point because I didn't have a backup. That was the honest truth. Everything I had done to that point with my hard drives, I had all my hard drives and my backups there at the location. And, back then you had like a power, a power Mac. It's not like these iMacs that I have now. You had like a tower, and this was just whole tons of information. And I took for granted that was going to be there. I just paused. I think I took a pause for 2 months thinking like, do I really want to embark in, like a whole journey of my work? Then I was kind of, playing around with photography a little bit. A friend of mine called me and said, Hernan, you know what? We need a shooter. He didn't even call it a photographer. We need a shooter, And I'm like, I said, I don't know much about photography. He said, all you have to do is stand by a tripod. We set it on the exposure and just click away. These were, we were shooting a prom, could you believe it, for a big studio over here on the West Coast. It was Alfred and Fabrics. I think they had 5,000 students coming through their studio.
Oh my God.
I mean, it was volume. It was just volume photography. I loved it because part of that was the interaction. You had a couple of minutes with each student. That person who hired me became my mentor. I didn't even know, but this guy was the president of the PPA at that time, which I don't know what's the PPA. He took me under his wings. I mean, he photographed, DiMaggio. He photographed, President Ford. He photographed, he was well-known photographer. And I think in making that jump in those 2 years was invaluable to me because I think everything to this point, of learning composition and color and learning, what values are and paints and pigments and just training my eyes since the age of 5 to this point. And these 2 years under the tutelage of this guy kind of put it all together. And I see where my journey was now at this, looking back in hindsight was like, wow, all that was paving to become a great photographer because putting all that in and applying those, because anybody can learn photography. Let me tell you something. It's a skill. All it is studying, the technical attributes, it's, exposure and f-stops and all these things. They're just numbers. What you don't learn is your experience in life, Mm-hmm. I mean, knowing what you are, if you're into the arts, if you're into the music, if you're into, motorcycle racing, all these things have trained you to this point, as a photographer, because then you start kind of applying things that have had a trajectory in your life that now you're looking through the scope of a camera, but intuitively you're working from this place in your life. So, I mean, I think, learn the skill, but, sometimes go outside of photography. Just don't be fixed in photography, I look at travel, I look at everything. And then, when it's an intersection of opportunity and preparation, you get the right job and you have this vast experience and study of everything that you could apply to your work now.
You were doing, that senior portrait gig for about a couple of years, you said.
2 years, yeah.
And people think, well, they see the work that you're doing now, and they would not see any sort of connection between those two photographers. But what did you learn that was invaluable to you from doing that work that you apply today when you photograph celebrities?
It's so funny because this guy, my mentor, when I first got the job, I didn't even know what it was, right? So I photographed a dance. The following week, he said, hey, come in for an interview, just because he liked me as a person. So another thing is like, you also have to have that personality. You just can't be a stiff person in front of a subject. He hired me for the job, and he said, the one discipline in all photography, to me, that constitutes being a really good photographer is a senior portraiture. I didn't even know what that was. I didn't even say anything. I said, wow, okay, senior portraiture. But I thought they were elders. I thought we were going to shoot. I thought we were going to shoot older people. I mean, I was just like out on left field. And, I asked the guy, like, where are these people? Like, where are we going to shoot these seniors? He's like, Hernan, these are schools. These are graduating. These are graduates. These are seniors in high school. It was so true, though, because, you're dealing with kids who don't want to be in front of a camera, right? For the most part. I mean, you got 80% of the kids do not want to be on a summer day and a hot day in a bungalow or in a studio taking their pictures. So that's one factor. Then you have, because you're doing volume photography. I mean, I remember one time shooting, it was 100 sessions, 100 senior portrait sessions in a day, 7 hours, which was insane. Like, how could you do 100 images? So it became volume. It became, we had 7 minutes with each subject. But it teaches you, because you have to have that that immediate interaction with the subject. Hey, hey, what do you like? These kids don't want to be there, and some of these guys are tough, like, oh, whatever, where I sit. So you kind of break that ice, you're like, don't worry about it, whatever, what sports you play, okay, you don't want to be here, let's get you out in 3 minutes. You give me 7 minutes. So there's something that makes them laugh, something that draws them in. And after that, you got to be able to evaluate them, make a calculation of their anatomy, what side am I going to photograph them from, and that's your starting point. So when you're doing this day in and day out, for 100 sessions in one day, doing over this for 2 years, oh my gosh, when I went into the real world, when I went to photograph people who gave me, it could have been 7 minutes. I photographed Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield it was like 6:38 in 6 minutes and 38 seconds because Mike did not want to be there. And to me, it took me back to that place of boot camp, because as he's walking down the door, I'm meeting him for the first time. And he was so guarded, he said, who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing here? And he was grilling me, So I had to break that initial ice, get to meet him, walk him to the stage where he's going to be sitting with Evander, and then make a contact. Make sure that, he's going to give me something that is just not a person sitting in front of a camera with no expression. I applied. Now I look back and I think I wouldn't be the photographer I am today had I not gone through that boot camp, in my career. Because now if somebody gives me an hour, it's like, oh my gosh, I could get it done in 20 minutes and 40 minutes just having a good time with the subject. So yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing. Yeah, because you have to learn not to be intimidated.
Absolutely.
Whether it's 7 minutes or an hour, it's like you have to realize that you got to maintain control, because as soon as they sense that you don't,
oh my gosh,
there's nothing.
You hit the nail on the head. You could never lose your position as a director in a set, even if you've lost it. You have to go through the motions and be assertive and be in that position of a director, because that's the respect. People are in a set and people will hire you and you be in a position for taking somebody's portrait because they've done their work. They've looked at your website. You've made a contact with them. You've committed to giving them a product, whether it's, a wall portrait or, a magazine cover or just something special for their family. It's a mutual commitment between this, your client and yourself. So they're entrusting everything in you. So once you start and I see this a lot of, and I might have done this in my early career when you're playing around with the lights and, and your subject's kind of waiting and, you're looking on the back of your camera and checking to see, what the calculations are and taking a few shots or if you lose it, if you lose that position of being in as a director, then your subject, you've lost them. And it's very important, and I think part of that is doing your homework. I mean, do your homework on the subject, do your homework as a photographer on your lighting, on your skills, I always have even 4 plans, I got plan A, B, C, and D, because most of the time you will be relying on not executing your first plan. You're going to go back to the lights didn't work, or the subject said he gave me half hour, now he's got 10 minutes, or he's not liking me, there's some type of friction between me and him. So you end up 80% of the time just sitting down without a camera, interacting with your subject, okay, I'm sorry, what can I do for you? And then the last 10 minutes, it's just picking up that camera. And sometimes it happens to me, especially doing celebrity work. I have these really intricate lighting setups, and sometimes I might light for 6 hours, pre-light a day before. And then I find out that the subject scratches everything, or I end up doing the whole session with just sitting back with the individual. And then I tell my assistants, scratch it. Let's go to plan B, just get a huge parabolic. And it's happened, and this is my plan B. So, I get a 7-foot parabolic, big light source, with silver inner baffle, because it gives me that specularity and that pop. I could control, just change the angle of the light if I just want to use an edge and create more of a cinematic lighting. I put the light source as close as I can and I create it towards the subject. So it gives me 5 different looks with that one light. And it takes me 3 minutes to build that set. So I've done that, because why? I have to spend the time with the individual, which always is the most important thing in a portrait session. I don't care who it is. It could be a senior portrait. It could be a couple's 50th anniversary, or it could be a celebrity. You know, that interaction is the value of the portrait. If that person is not present there in that image, then it's not valuable to anybody. So that's really critical.
There is a term in podcasting which describes shows that have petered out and are no longer being produced. It's called pod fading. There are a lot of reasons why a show can cease production, but usually the biggest one is that people realize how much work is involved. And when you realize you're not going to get rich from this, it's mighty hard to justify all that time and effort. Though I can't speak for everyone, I know that I have persisted in doing this because I love these conversations. I love the fact that I can share them with you, people all over the world. Yes, it involves time and money, but I believe this show brings something special to my life and hopefully to yours. You can help us to keep doing this every week by becoming a Patreon supporter. You can contribute $5, $10, $20 or more a month by visiting patreon.com/thecandidframe. These modest amounts add up and provide us the means to keep the show growing and thriving. So if you enjoy the work we're doing, please come on board as a Patreon supporter today. Thank you. I was looking at the images that you made of Nia Peoples.
Oh, yeah, Nia, yeah.
Yeah, and those are some wonderful photographs because I just love the diversity of imagery that you got. Was that all from a single session? All those were multiple setups from a single day? And if so, tell me about that.
That was all one day. Yeah, I think we had probably like about maybe 6 hours. It was at a beautiful house up here in the hills, you know, at Wilshire. It was like this penthouse, huge penthouse with three levels. And it had everything. I mean, it had these beautiful vaulted ceilings. It had a staircase going up. It had, you know, this panoramic view on the outside. So, you know, she had a contact to allowed us to shoot there at her place. Then I also took a couple of seamless. Like I always go to that classic plain background as well. And I think that's an advice I give to any photographer. You know, it's beautiful to shoot on location, but always secure that one shot that's going to be just a clean editorial shot on a plain gray background, a plain white background, even a black background, but secure those shots. So, you know, that's pretty much what we did. But it's funny because I think the magic that happened in that session, and I think, you know, as photographers, we have our vision. You know, we sit back and we have our storyboards, or we say like, this is what I want to execute. And we close ourselves to the magic that happens outside of ourselves, you know? Mm-hmm. And I'm a huge collaborator. I'm not selfish when it comes to photography because some of the most brilliant images I have is, you know, a makeup artist who knows nothing about photographer and will say like, oh gosh, Hernan, wouldn't it be cool if we just wrap this thing around? And it happens. And I don't know if you saw that one image of Nia Peoples where she has a basket in her head with these petals flying. Mm-hmm. The backstory on this was funny because her close friend came in and, you know, he's like a spiritual advisor to her, but they're close friends. And he's also a mutual friend of mine. He does a lot of stuff with the celebrities here in LA. They had kind of a riff, you know, and that morning he's like, oh my gosh, and like, we gotta hone her in, right? Because she was happy. I think it was a great photo shoot, you know? And he's like, you know, she's becoming a diva, so let's pull her back a little bit. So for him, it was a trick. Like, hey, let's just get this basket and just put it on top of her head and get these petals. And he was kind of trying to play a prank on her, but I saw it as brilliant. I said, oh my gosh, like we had this crimson color background and she had this, you know, red lipstick and everything. I said, this is the shot. He did it as a joke. I saw it as a hero shot. I said, my gosh, this would be amazing if we got these petals and we calculated it right while they're falling off her face. And it was a mistaken collaboration because he started out of a funny place and we ended up, I'm like, this is brilliant, you know? And I told her, I said, yeah, let's just do 3 shots, get it and throw it in. And as it is, we're all making her laugh. So he's laughing at her. I'm laughing with her because we're just having fun. And then I took the shot and it just happened, you know?
I love that shot, especially because her laughter is so genuine.
Oh my gosh,
You
absolutely.
know, and because you'll have people who smile or laugh at the camera, and it's the face. It's, it's the expression that they know how to give.
Right,
And I
right.
looked at that and I go, that's a sincere moment. And I think it's oftentimes the most difficult expression to get, whether someone is celebrity or not, just because a lot of people aren't completely comfortable with a camera, or those people who are incredibly comfortable, they exert a certain degree of control. So that spontaneity that you as a photographer want can be kind of elusive.
No, absolutely. It's you're 100% on that, because I think that laugh. If you look at that image and you meet her, that's who she is. She's got this infectious smile, and it's very genuine. So that laugh happened because she was just having a fun time. Now, one thing on that, as when we're photographing and we're having subjects, a lot of it is dialogue. Understand that that shot would not have happened if we just say like, hey, throw the head over your baskets and we're all quiet. There's like constant dialogue, because if I start, interacting with the subject and they start sharing something of their childhood or their experience that had coming over, or something fun that happened along the way, there's subtext, in their eyes, there's subtext. You don't see it. You're not going to see, the viewer's not going to know the story behind it, but there's some attraction of that portrait that gives you that subtext. Like, oh my gosh, like that smile looks so genuine. But if you see the backstory, it was a funny moment. It was just a funny, happy moment. And I just kind of tell, okay, like smile big, say cheese, or just laugh on the count of three, laugh big, because there's no information. So there's not a story. So as we're dialoguing, and I always have this constant dialogue with my subject. And I'm always questioning on my approach to posing. Like, do you pose them? Do you sit them in a certain way? Natural expression is the person. The person is going to give you the dialogue, the nonverbal communication. The way the person sits. If they sit here and they're really stoic and tall, then that's who they are, because that's what they're giving me. I have subjects like Eddie Griffin. Eddie Griffin will sit back in a chair, slouchy, and that's who he is. He's inviting. You meet him and he's open. He's a very approachable, and his personality is really, really huge. So I study all this mannerism, because they're dictating, they're guiding me along the process of what they're giving me, and all I do is refine the poses. So if somebody's like sitting way back, and I'm not going to take a formal portrait looking up somebody's nose, So I said, hey, just kind of lean forward with that attitude, but just kind of like lay back and just kind of, so there's small refinements that start from a natural place for that subject. Then I just do, and I think it comes back from my study within, like the confines of classical portraiture. Because, I think it's very valuable learning the structure of where to put the hands, and not to show the front of the hand, not to shoot a woman from too low of an angle. That's all fine and dandy. It's good to know these rules, but loosely. It's good to know these rules just so have some parameters where to start, where to gauge. But they say not to photograph a woman from a low angle because it's just too masculine, it's too strong, it makes them look too stoic. Well, I photographed Helen Reddy, who had three Grammys, and she was doing something for a United States postal stamp here, and she's a strong woman. She has the national anthem song in the White House for "I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar." That was the national women's lib song. So part of that is, well, how do I create strength for a woman on a plain gray background with just a black shirt? Well, I think part of that is my camera angle. If I make her look strong and stoic and have her just look not into my camera, but have her look past my camera, then I create a strong image in what would have been just a static place, with just a static background. So I think that's for us as photographers, learn the regulations, learn the rules, learn composition, all that. But there are no rules in good photography, if I could put it that way. Yeah. And this is from somebody who's been judging photography for entire life,
What's interesting about the nature of your business is that this is commissioned work from the celebrity and their people. It's not so much that you're shooting for the purposes of a magazine article or something. The images may be used for that, right, but it may be used for publicity, for a book cover, a variety of different things, which is sort of a unique niche. How did you sort of find that pocket for yourself as a photographer?
Good. You did your homework, because you're absolutely right. Not many people know that. I did start out, and I don't even have an agent to this point, which is, it's pretty difficult, to advance so much in celebrity work or commercial work without having an agent. It's a hard place to be, because you have to do a lot of, knocking on doors and doing, just foot to the pavement. I was pretty fortunate, because I think when I embarked on this journey, I think that's exactly what I set as the target. I said, this is what I want to do. I want to pursue this type of work, celebrity work. I want to do, editorial work. But it became a place, and I think it was a ripple effect. It's kind of, the seeds I planted were pretty much a one-on-one relationship with an agent. I would contact an agency. I would, cold call, let's say William Morris. I cold call William Morris in Tennessee, and I said, hey, listen, I would like to photograph some of your musicians. They said, hey, and I think part of this is you have to be prepared. Your website, your body of work has to be ready for you to display and to show, because first impressions in this industry is one time. They're going to,
Right.
They're going to say, what's like your work, for instance. I'll tell you when and I'm critical. I saw your work. I said, wow, you got beautiful work, man. You got to be proud of your work, because it's on point. The lighting is just clean, crisp work, And I get a feel for you, your personality. I get a feel for you as a photographer, both as your personality and as a photographer, just by looking at your work for, a couple of minutes. So,
thank you.
And that's just one time. That's first impression. You can't go back and say, oh, Hernan, well, would I try to do this? And, just think within the lines of this. No. They're going to say, what's your website? Show me who you are. So I started making these calls, but, backtracking, I knew that was my target, but what do I have to do to get to that place? Well, I need a good body of work. I got to just show. If you have 6 good pieces, show your 6 good pieces instead of having 20 pieces of, 6 good ones and 14 mediocre. I said, take it all out and just put your best work forward, right? And then they said, hey, we like your work. Let me connect you with an agent who does up and coming actors in LA. And that's how I started. So I started working with one agency. Then I started working with this Latin agency here in Burbank. This guy was in charge of like Julio Iglesias, Enrique Iglesias, Ricky Martin. But they were calls, they were just, and I think when you started out, you have to pay your dues. You just kind of go to say, I'm here to photograph a magazine. You're sitting down at a red carpet. I don't do red carpet events now. I've done maybe in the past few years, maybe in the past 10 years, I've done maybe 2 red carpets, but as a favor, because it's a good relationship I have with an agent. And they said, Hernan, can you cover my celebrity? And it's a mass place. You're shooting with paparazzi, but it's customer relations, They're now, it's a mutual respected relationship that we both have. They've entrusted their celebrities to me. Now I help them out, when they're in time of need, like, hey, what do you need? What can I do? And I don't charge them. Why would I put whatever money value on something that they would say like, well, what do you mean you're charging me? But we're giving you the bigger fish, So, you have to be very discerning. You have to be very wise in this industry, but you have to pay your dues. Go to events. Have your business card ready. And I did that. I met, some of these celebrities I met, were like a business card, and I photographed somebody on a red carpet, and they'll say, hey, where can I get my event photos? Because it's a social media industry. Everybody has to be relevant. Everybody needs to be active and know that they were at some certain event. And I give my business card, like, listen, this is what I do. But also consider that I could do a one-on-one session for, publicity and for public, for your website. And that's how I do it. Other times, and I've built these relationships over the years, and I have maybe 6 agents that I work with. And all of a sudden, like I did Mario Lopez, and that was through an established relationship I have with one specific agent. After the years, he said, hey, Hernan, you know what? We just picked up Mario Lopez. He's doing a commercial line. He's got this athletic wear. You're the guy that's going to fit the job for us. There's no agent involved. There's no manager. There's no publicist. It's the person. It becomes a mutual respected relationship, And that's why it's so important for you to be respectful of people, their time, your deadlines, the work you do. You got to value.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much value in this, both mutual for the agent and for you. And then it's taken off from there. So you're absolutely right. If I was working with Eddie Griffin, because again, Eddie Griffin was a call that I did to an agent who referred me, then all of a sudden I had Eddie Griffin. I shot with him one time. And, when I shoot with one person, again, first impressions, I make sure there's refreshments. I'm sure that they're comfortable. We got a wardrobe stylist. I got my best makeup artist. Their experience is so good that, they're going to call me because there's nothing that they could say. Like we had, Hernan treated us bad. His craft wasn't any good. He, everything is really on point. And now I photographed him right before the shutdown, the coronavirus shutdown. Eddie Griffin called me to shoot a billboard in Las Vegas, so we shot this billboard for some of the stuff he's doing there. But again, it started just a one-on-one. I don't know. You're absolutely right. I don't know where these images will end up. It ends up in a magazine. It ends up in the cover, like I shot Floyd Mayweather. It ended up in a cover of a magazine. I'll get a call from Sports Illustrated. Can we use your image of Mike Tyson? It's not editorial work that I'm doing. It's not, commercial work that I'm doing. It's not a specific work. I'm shooting an individual. And the end result of that shot could be just anywhere.
So how do you work it out in terms of usage? Is it a buyout? Do you provide them an unlimited license? How do you sort of work that out with a variety of different clients that you have?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time it's for a specific job. And they'll say, okay, we're hiring you to shoot, like I just shot Reggie Miller, the NBA Hall of Famer 3 days ago. Now that was specific for a brand, like an apparel company. He's doing something for, Black Lives Matter. I had to sign a non-disclosure. It was like Hernan, it's a buyout rate, we just want to select images just for this line. Now, sometimes a buyout is kind of interesting because what he said was we want to own the images, but it doesn't mean it's non-exclusive or inclusive to you or just exclusive to them. Sometimes they own the images, but you also as a photographer own the rights to your images. It's different than a complete buyout when somebody comes in and that's, you're going to make 3 times the amount of an image than you would for give me the hard drive and let me take all the images. Then, if you want full access and I don't, then you have to pay for that rate. Opposed to, we shot the magazine. I shot, for this specific job, we shot like almost 4,000 images. We had 4 cameras going.
Oh my!
It was crazy. It was the most challenging photo shoot I've done in my entire career because we're shooting outdoors, we're shooting action, we're shooting lifestyle, action because they want to look like they're at a place riding bikes. This is what it was. Very contrasty light. We've got to make sure that the images are sharp without keeping the background sharp. So technically there was a lot going on for this photo shoot. We had to create lifestyle portraits like in the Santa Monica Mountains. That was a different camera. And they gave us only 2 hours to do all this. At the end of the day, there were beautiful images. Everybody was happy. But now I have an archive with 4,000 images that I'm going to use. Everybody, I got paid for the job. In a job like that, I got hired for a day rate, I'll set a day rate, my day rate for this will be whatever it is, $3,500 for, the 2 hours that they got, the 3 hours that they got. And in that time, you get the images, you get the final product, which are 12 retouched images. Now, somebody hires you, 7-hour day. It's different because you're bringing in a team, you're bringing makeup artists, you're bringing, so all that is all over the place, when it comes to kind of mapping out what your fees are going to be, who owns the rights. But I think because I'm working on that one-on-one with an agent or a manager, it becomes almost, I hate to put it this way because there's a lot of contracts that people have to kind of negotiate and say who owns the rights, who owns this, or what are you going to do with the rights. But it becomes through a stream of emails, and this is how I protect myself. And through a stream of emails, the gentleman's agreement almost. An agent will say, Hernan, we need this, and this is what the client said. We need this, and at the end of the day, we want 12 finalized images, and we own the rights to this. So that's the contract, because I'm going back and I'm agreeing to say, okay, under the stipulations put here by you and your company, we will provide the 12 images. We will also have access to be able to use our images for marketing purposes, for website, for, you know, whatever it is. So it becomes that kind of that gentleman's agreement, opposed to, say, for instance, and this is a perfect example, you know, when I photographed Mike Tyson again, this gentleman would not sign a contract. You know, it took 3 months to get these two guys on stage to take a photo because his manager was involved and his agent wanted to know who owned the rights for the image and such and such and such, and who their agent talks to, you know, Evander Holyfield's agent and everything, you know. Once you put that language on paper and say, you know, I need for you to sign here where Hernan Photography owns all the rights to the images, sometimes they walk away. You know, they'll say, we won't grant that. They want exclusive rights. So I've been smart about it to kind of protect myself on those emails in the stream. We're saying, you know, under the context of this conversation via email, I start writing out the language. It's almost like a soft contract. Once they say and they confirm in an email saying, you know, okay, we do agree, we want to use Mike Tyson's image, and they did. You know, this is the agreement. They wanted to use his image for a book, one of his books. But then again, under that agreement, I said I also have mutual access to be able to use, you know, his persona for marketing myself and for it's 50-50. So that was the agreement we had. So, but sometimes you have to put it on paper, signed by everybody else, and that's just the way it goes.
Do you sometimes work with a producer?
I have sometimes, actually, in a couple of the movies that I've done, or, you know, I've worked, like, you mean like a still photographer, you're saying? Or
yeah, still photographer, like, producer, yeah. Who sort of coordinates, negotiates the contracts and, you know, puts everything on paper and does all that sort of negotiation for you, leaving you
It's great. I mean, it's great. When that happens, that's their specialty. You know, and there's a couple of agents, maybe two agents that I know that work that way. It's all in writing, and they're powerhouse agents. They're well respected. You know, when they say jump, people how high, you know. So I love it because they come in with that business approach and write everything out and say, you know, you're going to get hired. Hernan's going to supply this for you. He's the man, you know, and his team, and we have access. These are the names that are going to be allowed in the set. These are his people, and they do the negotiation. That's all resolved, and all I have to do is show up. So, you know, that's a good point. You know, when you have that streamline in the process of the negotiation, it makes your job as a photographer so much easier, because sometimes we have to wear multiple hats. And I think what happens now as a photographer, because I think they're making us indispensable. We're like, oh, everybody's a photographer. You know, if this person's, you know, if you're charging, you know, your half day is $3,500, this person does the job for $1,000. Well, you're going to get the $1,000 rate. That's what you're paying for. So, you know, that's what satisfies you. Then, you know, that's it. But understand, you know, this is the rate and the reason why I come with this. You know, it isn't, we come on point. Every image you're going to pull out, and we just did this again with Reggie. We had to go straight from this live to a website in Italy. No time to retouch. So these images were going straight live. So if you're not on point with your exposure and everything, you know, so that's what happens, you know. And I think this is why you're paying me, because every image, and they were impressed. They're like, wow, you know, we didn't know we could use these straight out of camera. It looks like they're retouched, but that's your job. So, you know, you're going to base your rate. And I think when I started out, I didn't start there. It was incremental. You know, I started out, you know, $750. I started for $750, I could do this for you. I'll give you, you know, 6 hours or whatever. Then it went up to $1,200, you know, and I have people, advisors, you know, I had mentors along the process. You know, a big Hollywood photographer here, when I was kind of starting in this trajectory of, you know, celebrity work, he's like, Hernan, like, you shouldn't leave your house under $1,500. That's your base rate. And then I started kind of building up, you know. He said, you'll know when to stop. And, you know, then I know this is where I am now. You know, this is my rate now, because you need to be competitive, you know, because you can't train everybody saying this is why you're paying this. They just look at your work. Everybody's shopping around. Everybody look at all these photographers, and these are the 5 guys we want, and this is their rate. You know, what's within our budget. So, you know, it's there as a and, you know, our industry's going that way. Everybody's a photographer. You know, pick up a camera, but they see that they got garbage. You know, their work isn't on point. So your work, for instance, if somebody charges, you go in and say, I want you to do a wall portrait, and you're charging them. You could charge them, I don't know. I could see you charging them $5,000 for a Rembrandt. That's your rate. I'm going to go in and you're charging. I'm paying you. You're paying me this much money for a 24 by 36 finalized on a piece of canvas with a nice frame for your house. And I could see it because, okay, let me look at your work. Yeah, that's what I expect. And if you say, well, I'll do it for $1,200, they'll be ecstatic, They'll pay the $1,200 or they'll pay the $5,000. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. They love your work. They want you because of your body of work. That's what they're hiring. The rest of the parts, you could kind of, move around a little bit. You could kind of, give or take. But I think there should be a place that you should always value yourself as a photographer.
Well, my last question that I ask each guest is I ask them to recommend another photographer, and it can be anyone, someone you've long admired or someone you've recently discovered. So who would that photographer be and why?
It's so funny because one of the photographers that I very much admire is Horst and Horst. Yeah. He was he came from a graphic design background. The guy was kind of, he was neurotic, his work was like never enough. He kept on pursuing. As a matter of fact, I could show you a book because I leave it here on my coffee table every so often. And you're talking about years ago. Sometimes I research photographers from 1890 and I look at their work, and their work is so relevant today. I create thumbnails for myself and I'm like, wow, somebody will point out, this is beautiful. I mean, it could be a cover of a Vogue magazine, and that was shot in 1890 by some photographer, an unknown photographer. And I love doing that research. But Horst had this, just the boldness of his images, the backlighting. He created a lot of silhouettes. He would put this exposed for this bright white background, and it underexposed the subject, and it created this mystery. But then when he went to his lifestyle stuff, he wasn't just like really like a niche photographer. He had a pretty vast, body of work. But I just think just looking at it and studying his work and seeing what he did and why he did certain things, but there's always that undertone of graphic design. You're looking at his work and you're looking at graphic images and you see where that came from. So I think a lot of people could learn just from studying his composition and contrast in his work.
That's a great recommendation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man. I really enjoyed this.
Mario next, man. You're the man.
Thanks to Hernan for joining us. Find out more about him and his work by visiting hernanphotography.com. If you're a devoted listener and subscribe to the show, write us a review on whatever service you listen to podcasts. Those reviews have allowed us to grow. Thanks to Serum Tap from the UK for his 5-star review. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and our mailing list. On the YouTube channel, I offer critiques on images submitted by TCF listeners like you, while the mailing list keeps you updated with all TCF events, including workshops and more. Sign up today. And remember, you can support the show by contributing to our Patreon effort or make a one-time or recurring donation via PayPal. Thanks to David Colby, Eyes of Mania, A. Grissom, Richard Bootwell, and Martin Stepka for their recent contributions. We also provide a series of ebooks on photography available for purchase on our website. It's my way of sharing my experience and knowledge, and another way for you to support the show. And if you can't find every episode of the show, download the Candid Frame app, which is available for both Apple iOS and Android. And because of your generosity, it's free to download and use. No additional purchases are required. The Candid Frame's audio engineer is Martin Taylor, who you can find at theothermartintaylor.com. The show's senior producer is Cynthia Parker, and our music is from Kevin MacLeod, whose royalty-free music can be found at Incompetech.com. And this is Ibarian X, and this is The Candid Frame.